Good morning. I'm glad you're here. Welcome to the Monday Message. Each week, we take a few minutes to reflect on leadership, character, and the choices that shape who we become. As members of the public safety community, parents, spouses, teammates, coworkers, and neighbors. These are not lectures or perfect answers. They are simply observations from our career in public service and lessons I have learned along the way, with the hope that they challenge all of us to think a little differently as we begin a new week. If this is your first time listening, I'm Dan Dillon. I spent more than 3 decades in public service, and every Monday I share a few thoughts on leadership, character, and living a life of purpose. So, pour yourself a cup of coffee, settle in, and let's get started. Today, I want to talk about what happens when the plan changes. Not because any of us enjoy change, but because none of us get to avoid it. We make plans, we build careers, we raise families. We imagine what the next 5 or 10 years will look like. And then life has a way of reminding us that we are not completely in control. Sometimes the change is something we choose. Sometimes it's something that happens to us. Sometimes it's exciting. Sometimes it's painful. And sometimes it can be both at the same time. The question is not whether our plans will change, because they will. The real question is, how do we respond when they do? A couple years ago, my wife and I made one of the biggest decisions of our lives. After spending more than 30 years serving in Virginia, we packed up our lives and moved across the country to Colorado. On paper, it was exciting. New jobs, a new community, a new home, new adventures. And honestly, it was something we had been talking about for some time. But wanting to change and experiencing change are two very different things. Because when you make a major change in your life, you do not simply move towards something. You also move away from something. And I do not think I fully understood that when we made the decision. We were not just moving across the country. We were leaving behind a life we had spent decades building. People we knew, places that were familiar, relationships, routines, a community, a sense of belonging. Everything that had once felt normal suddenly became something we had to leave behind. And then there was our daughter. At the time, she was a rising junior in high school. Moving a teenager across the country is not exactly a simple change of address. There would be a new school, new friends, a completely different environment. The uncertainty that comes with being a teenager and suddenly having your entire world changed can be a difficult proposition. As parents, we knew this was going to be a challenge for her, but we also believed it was the right decision for our family. And this is one of the complicated things about life. Sometimes you can make a good decision and still experience difficult consequences. But perhaps the hardest part for me personally was leaving my son on the East Coast. He was already building his own life. He had his own direction, his own responsibilities, and moving to Colorado meant putting thousands of miles between us. That was difficult because distance does not just change geography. It changes the dynamics of relationships. It changes the ordinary moments. You miss a quick conversation, an unexpected visit, the simple ability just to be there. I knew I was not leaving my son behind in the sense that I stopped being his father, but I also knew that being thousands of miles away was going to be different, and it was. That experience taught me something about change that I had not fully understood before. Sometimes moving forward means leaving something behind that you did not necessarily want to lose. That does not automatically mean the decision was wrong. It means the decision had a cost. And I think we sometimes forget that. We talk about change as though it is simply about getting something new, a new job, a new opportunity, a new chapter. But every new chapter means the previous chapter has ended. And sometimes there's grief in that, even when you are excited about what comes next. When we first arrived in Colorado, I also had to learn how to let go of something else: comparison. I found myself comparing everything to what I had known. The culture was different, the relationships were different, the expectations were different, the way people communicated was different, the way things were done was different. And I caught myself thinking, this is not how it used to be. Sometimes I wish it worked the way it did back home. And looking back now, I realize I was asking the wrong questions. Because the goal was never to recreate Virginia and Colorado. The goal was to build something new. And that required me to let go of the idea that familiarity automatically meant better. I think this is one of the hardest parts of change. We often want the new chapter, but we want it to feel exactly like the old one. We want the new job, but we want everyone to work the way our old coworkers did. We want a new relationship, but we compare it to the last one. We want to move forward, but we keep looking backward. We want the future without giving up the comfort of the past. And sometimes that is simply not possible. Growth requires us to make room. Sometimes that means letting go of expectations. Sometimes it means admitting that we do not have all the answers. Sometimes it means being willing to be uncomfortable for a while. And sometimes it means accepting that something can be difficult and still be right. The fire service has taught me something about this as well. Conditions change, informations change, plans change. The best response is not to become frustrated because reality did not follow the plan. The best response is to recognize what has changed, understand what still matters, and adjust. That lesson applies far beyond the fire service because life rarely asks us to abandon everything we believe in. More often than not, it asks us to change the way we get there. The circumstances may change, the path may change, the timeline may change, but our values do not have to change. Our commitment to the people we love does not have to change, and our responsibility to become better does not have to change. The older I get, the more I realize that adaptability has very little to do with liking change. Adaptability simply builds a foundation that allows change to happen. The world around us keeps changing. Our families change, our careers change, our relationships change, and we change. The person who is right for one season of life may need to grow into someone different for the next. I think back to that decision to move to Colorado, and would I make every part of it the same way if I could go back? And the answer is, I don't know. Life does not give us that option, but I do know this. The move changed me. It taught me that a good decision can still be painful. It taught me that moving forward can create distance from people you love. It taught me that you can miss parts of your old life without wanting to go back. And it taught me that sometimes the path forward requires us to grieve what we were leaving behind while still being grateful for where we are going. Those things can exist at the same time. You can be excited and uncertain, grateful and sad, confident and afraid. Change does not require us to choose one emotion. It simply requires us to keep moving. Our daughter had to navigate her own version of that change. She had to leave friends. She had to leave a school and the community she knew. She had to walk into a new environment and figure out where she belonged. Her experience was not the same as mine, and it did not need to be. So maybe the question this week is not, why is everything changing? Maybe the better question is, what is this change asking me to become? Maybe it's asking you to become more patient, more flexible, more courageous, more present, more willing to listen. Maybe it's asking you to let go of something you've been holding on to for far too long. Or maybe it is simply asking you to trust yourself enough to take the next step. Because when the plan changes, we have a choice. We can spend all of our energy wishing we were back where we started, or we can accept where we are, learn from it, and begin building what comes next. You do not have to love every change. You do not have to understand every change. And you certainly do not have to pretend that every change is easy. But you can decide how you will respond to it. Sometimes the path changes not because we are lost, but because life is leading us somewhere we cannot see from where we started. So as you begin this week, think about the plan you had for your life. Think about what has changed. Think about what you have had to leave behind. And then ask yourself, what still matters? Because when the plan changes, that's where we should begin. Hold on to your values, hold on to the people who matter, hold on to the lessons, and be willing to let go of the things that no longer serve where you are going. The goal is not to recreate the past. The goal is to become the person who can thrive in the future. Thank you for spending a few minutes with me today. If this message challenged you to think a little differently, then our time together was well spent. If it resonated with you, consider sharing it with someone who could use a little encouragement this week. Until next Monday, choose the harder right over the easier wrong. Take care of one another, stay curious, lead with purpose, and never stop growing. I'll see you next Monday.